The elevator doors opened on the 43rd floor, and the first thing Kezia Addo heard was laughter. Not the polite kind. The kind that doesn't bother to lower itself. She stepped out with her portfolio case under one arm and her coat still damp from the rain outside, and she could see them through the glass wall of the boardroom. 3 senior partners standing around the credenza, coffee cups in hand, heads tilted back. One of them, senior partner Douglas Holt, had his hand flat on the table the way men do when they're making a point they've already made 10 times and intend to make 10 more. She had 4 minutes before the 9 o'clock pitch began. She took the stairs down 1 floor to the associate office, hung her coat on the hook behind the door, and stood at her desk for exactly 7 seconds. That was a habit her father had given her when she was small. When something frightens you, stand still first, just 7 seconds. Then move. She moved. The case she'd spent 11 weeks building, the Mercer environmental wrongful dismissal suit, was one the firm had taken on as a goodwill file. Low profile. Not expected to go anywhere. When Magic been assigned to it, 6 Motherton had delivered the news the way someone mentions a dental appointment. Regrettable but necessary. A first-year associate needs the experience. Keep it tidy. Don't let it bleed into the billing hours. Nobody told her. The client had been waiting 3 years. The elevator that morning had been crowded. She'd stood near the back, portfolio pressed to her side, and overheard 2 men from the corporate floor talking about the Mercer file, without knowing she was there. One of them said it was a lost cause. The other one laughed and said it had always been a lost cause, that the company's legal team had buried the documentation so deep it would take a miracle to surface it, and that sending a junior associate was the firm's way of showing the client the door without actually showing them the door. She did not say anything. She pressed her portfolio a little tighter to her side and counted the floors as they rose. Her grandmother had told her once. She was maybe 9, maybe 10, sitting on the back steps of a house in Scarborough. When you feel the ground shaking, find something steady. Count the steps. Count the tiles. Count whatever's in front of you. She counted 12 floors. Upstairs, when she entered the boardroom, the laughter had settled into something more professional. 4 partners arranged around the oval table. Russell Pemberton at the head. Gray suit, silver cufflinks. The expression of a man who has decided what the meeting will conclude before it has begun. Beside him, senior associate Theodore Crane, who had been at the firm for 19 years and had never once asked a question he didn't already know the answer to. Across from him, partner Lorraine Whitfield, who was the most senior woman in the room, and who looked at Kezia the way people look at the weather, noting it, having no particular feeling about it. And at the far end, Douglas Holt, who had been laughing in the glass corridor 10 minutes ago and had now arranged his face into something neutral. "Miss Addo," Pemberton said. "Not Kezia. Not our associate. Not the lawyer who has been working this file for half a year. Miss Addo." She set her portfolio on the table and opened it without sitting down. "The claim is wrongful dismissal under Ontario's Employment Standards Act," she said. "The client, Mr. Olu Mercer, was terminated from Halcyon Industrial in February of 2021 after reporting a chemical discharge into the Rouge River that the company had been concealing from regulators since 2018. "We're aware of the backstory," Holt said. She continued as though he hadn't spoken. "The company's position has always been that Mr. Mercer was terminated for performance reasons. Chronic lateness, insubordination, failure to meet targets. The documentation they submitted in 2022 supports that narrative. The problem," she turned to the second page of the brief, "is that it's fabricated." The room was quiet. Pemberton's expression did not change. "That's a significant allegation." "It is," she said, "which is why I spent 6 weeks verifying it before saying it out loud." What Halcyon's legal team had done was clean, in the way that only things done by professionals with budget are clean. The performance reports had the right dates. The signatures were legitimate. The file looked exactly the way a termination for cause file should look. and that was precisely the problem. The report referenced meetings that had taken place, referenced supervisors who existed, referenced a disciplinary process that was formally documented. But the timestamps were wrong. Not obviously wrong. Not wrong in a way that shows up when you read the file once or twice, or even 10 times. Wrong in a way that only shows up when you pull the server access logs from the company's own HR management system. Logs that Halcyon had produced as part of standard disclosure without realizing what they contained. And cross-reference them against the document metadata. The performance reports had been created after the termination date. Backdated, carefully, with the kind of care that assumes no one will look closely enough. She had looked closely enough. She laid the server logs on the table. She laid the metadata analysis beside them. She laid the affidavit from a digital forensics consultant she'd retained on her own time who had looked at the same documents and arrived at the same conclusion. For a moment, nobody spoke. Theodore Crane picked up the forensics report. He read the first page slowly, then the second. He set it down and picked up the server logs. "Where did you get these?" he said. "Standard disclosure," she said. They were in the package Halcyon's counsel submitted in March. Page 412 of 460. Crane looked at her. Then he looked at the report again. Holt had not picked up anything. He was sitting with his arms crossed and an expression that was trying to be skeptical but was not quite getting there. "Even if the dates don't match," he said, "there are explanations, system errors, administrative backlogs. You're making a very large leap." "I'm making the leap the evidence supports," she said. "The evidence you've selected," he said. There it was. Not the words exactly, not anything she could point to cleanly, but the shape of it. The particular way a man says the evidence you've selected to a young black woman, who has just put something irrefutable on a table. The shape of it was familiar. She had felt that shape before. In lecture halls, in articling interviews, in the elevator that very morning while two men talked about a case they had never read. She did not flinch. "The forensics consultant is independent," she said. "His methodology is in Appendix C. If the firm wants a second opinion, I've already identified 2 other certified examiners in the GTA who could review it within the week. But the logs are Halcyon's own documents, produced by their own counsel. The only selection I made was reading them." Pemberton had been quiet for a long time. He was looking at the server logs now, not at Crane, not at Holt, just at the pages. "How long have you been sitting on this?" he said. "I confirmed it 12 days ago," she said. "I spent the 12 days building the corroborating record so that when I brought it here, there was nothing provisional about it." A long pause. Outside the boardroom windows, the city was doing what it always does in October. Gray sky, yellow leaves, the particular Toronto light that makes everything look like it's about to become a memory. Down on Bay Street, people were walking fast with their collars up, and none of them knew that on the 43rd floor of this building, something that had been buried for 3 years was about to surface. Pemberton set the server logs down. He looked at Kezia for a moment in a way that was different from how he'd looked at her when she walked in. Not warmer, exactly. Not apologetic. Just recalibrated. "You've drafted a motion?" he said. "It's in the portfolio," she said. Tab 3. He opened tab 3. Across the table, Lorraine Whitfield was reading the forensics report now, and she had the focused, almost still expression of someone who is taking something seriously. She turned a page. Then another. Then she looked up at Kezia briefly, not smiling, not nodding, just looking. Before she turned back to the report, Holt had uncrossed his arms. He hadn't picked anything up yet, but he had uncrossed his arms. Kezia stood at the end of the table and waited. She had learned, somewhere in the last 6 months, that some silences are doing work, that not every silence needs to be filled, that sometimes the most important thing you can do in a room full of people who underestimated you is stand still and let the evidence exist. The rain had started again outside. She could hear it faintly against the glass. Pemberton turned to page 2 of the motion, then page 3. He set his coffee cup down on the credenza behind him, without looking, the way people do when their hands need to be free. This would set a precedent, Crane said slowly. He wasn't objecting, he was thinking out loud, which was different, for wrongful dismissal in retaliation for environmental reporting. Yes, Kezia said, there's a federal whistleblower angle as well. The discharge went into a federally protected waterway. Federal, Holt said. Yes, that changes the exposure significantly. By several orders of magnitude, she said for Halcyon. Another silence. And in this one, she could feel the room shifting. Not dramatically, not the way rooms shift in films with someone standing and extending a hand and a swell of music underneath. Quietly, the way the light changes when a cloud moves. Something that had been settled was becoming unsettled. Something that had been decided was being reconsidered. Pemberton looked up from tab 3. I want the second forensic opinion, he said. Not because I doubt your work, because when we walk into court with this, I want 4 walls around it. I can have a name to you by end of day, she said. He nodded. Then, with the careful deliberateness of a man choosing his words with more precision than he'd used when she walked in. Good work, Miss Addo. She closed her portfolio. Not because she was done. There were 17 more tabs she hadn't needed. But because she was done with this room for today, and the rest could wait. She took the elevator back down. Not the stairs this time. She pressed the button for the lobby, and when the doors closed, she stood in the quiet of it, that small suspended moment between one floor and the next, and she let out a slow breath. Her grandmother would have said, "You see? 7 seconds, and then you move." She had moved. The lobby was busy. People coming in from the rain, shaking off umbrellas, pulling off gloves, doing all the ordinary things people do in lobbies in October. In a city that does not stop for weather. Nobody looked at her. Nobody knew what had just happened on the 43rd floor. Nobody knew that a man named Olu Mercer, who had reported a discharge into the Rouge River 3 years ago and lost his job for it, and had spent 37 months waiting for someone to look closely enough, was about to have someone in his corner with something irrefutable. She pushed through the revolving door. Outside, the rain was light, not enough to warrant an umbrella. She walked to the corner and waited for the light to change, portfolio under her arm, and she thought about calling her father. She thought about what he would say. Probably nothing at first. Probably just a long pause the way he did, the kind that means he's listening even before you've said the important part. She would tell him about the server logs. He wouldn't know what they were exactly, but he would know what they meant. He had been an electrician for 31 years, and he understood, in the way that people who work with systems understand, that the records are either right or they aren't. That there's no in-between. That when something doesn't line up, something doesn't line up, and all the explanations in the world don't make it line up. The light changed. She crossed. 3 blocks north. She stopped at the coffee shop on Adelaide and ordered something hot and sat down at the window table and looked out at the street for a while. She didn't check her phone. She didn't open the portfolio. She just sat there with both hands around the cup and watched the rain come down on Bay Street and thought about the fact that Olu Mercer would get a call today. Not the call, not yet. That was months of work still ahead, a motion and a hearing, and likely a contested process before anything resolved. But a different call. The call that says, "We found it. We can see it now. You were right and we can prove it." 3 years is a long time to wait for someone to look closely enough. She had looked closely enough. Outside the window, the city moved the way it always does. Relentless and indifferent and full of people carrying things no one else can see. But sometimes, in a boardroom on the 43rd floor, on a gray Tuesday in October, something buried comes to the surface. Not because of luck. Not because the right person happened to be in the right room. Because someone spent 11 weeks reading page 412 of a disclosure package that everyone else assumed was routine. That is how it works, most of the time, when it works. Not a grand moment. Not a raised voice or a triumphant turn. Just someone at a table with the evidence laid out, waiting for the room to catch up. Kezia Addo finished her coffee. She put on her coat. She walked back out into the rain.